Welcome back from the break. This is our second to final panel session on employer investment in skills. I'm Naomi Clayton. I'm Director of Policy and Research at the Learning and Work Institute. And we're going to focus this panel discussion on employer investment in skills. So I think over the course of the day so far, we've had lots of discussions about some of the big employment and skills challenges. And part of those discussions have included the need to focus more on the role of employers. And we'll be doing precisely that in this panel discussion. So we know that employer investment in skills is a key contributor to innovation, to productivity. We need that investment if we're going to make a successful transition to net zero. And it's really critically important from an individual's perspective too, in terms of accessing those training and development opportunities that support career and earnings progression. So vitally important from a business perspective, from an economy perspective, and from the perspective of individuals. Yet we also know that employer investment in spending has been falling over the longer term. We know that it's fallen by 26% in real terms per employee since 2005, and the sectors that historically have tended to invest the least have cut the most. And there are also some fairly stark inequalities in terms of who's actually able to access workplace training too. The potential returns on actually reversing some of these declines, addressing some of the inequalities that we see in terms of access to training are really quite significant. And we've seen that the Labour Party have pledged to create a flexible growth and skills levy. We've recommended taking a flex and match approach to the apprenticeship levy, where firms can spend a proportion of their levy payments on non-apprenticeship training, but only if they're investing at least as much in apprenticeships for young people too. But what more do government and businesses need to do to ensure that we're meeting skills needs and that we're really supporting kind of the transitioning economy and driving growth and really changing the picture that we've seen in terms of falling living standards and that kind of 2 decades of lost pay growth. So I'm delighted to be joined by a fantastic panel to discuss some of these issues. We've got Gratton, who's Deputy Director of Public Policy at the British Chambers of Commerce, Martin Chandler, who is Chief Experience and Enrichment Officer at Pathway Group, Robert West, who is Head of Education and Skills at the CBI, and Kirstie Donnelly, who is CEO of City and Guilds. So in a moment, I'm going to hand over to our panellists to ask them to make their initial contributions, and then we'll open up to the floor for questions. So do make sure that you've got plenty of questions to ask our panellists. So Jane, if I can come to you first, can you tell us about, the kind of the role of chambers of commerce in this area, particularly with the focus on training and skills, and what do you think influences employer investment in skills?
Okay, a little bit about the chambers then. Good afternoon, everyone. So there are 52 place-based chambers across the UK. Between them, they represent tens of thousands of businesses, right from your sole trader and your micro business, right the way up to the largest multinational companies. So we've got the whole spread. And what we've been saying is we need, as a country and as a business community, to plan better for skills. We're just not planning at all. And what we've been doing is, for the last 18 months or so, is running 32 of the 38 local skills improvement plans across England. These are convening employers, training providers, and other key stakeholders locally to look at the medium and long-term skills needs of the area. So this is helping employers to understand their skills needs, where they can find training provision. So it's market making, it's stimulating the market, demonstrating the market. And ideally, what we really need to see is this opportunity grasp where we're aligning careers advice, training provision, hopes, dreams, aspirations, investments, etc., to these jobs that are being created, not just now, but in the medium and long term. So already we've got much stronger partnerships locally between colleges and providers, with chambers convening that local engagement. Chambers have been acting as an interpreter and translator between the language of the skills system and the language that businesses speak in. They're not the same. They come at things from a very different perspective. There are some really neat solutions being devised locally with the local skills improvement fund money, working through colleges with providers, making that, going some way to fill in the gaps that are there already. So 65,500 businesses were engaged during those first few months. And the great thing is that many of those firms have engaged in the skills agenda for the first time. A lot of goodwill, a lot of raised expectations amongst employers around things are going to be better now that I've told you what I need, but also managing expectations and pushing back to employers and saying, actually, there's some expectations on you as a business community to invest. So we think that's really going to make a difference. We need to certainly stick to the local skills improvement plans or help them evolve in a way that keeps businesses engaged. In terms of what influences employers, what we've heard is recruitment difficulties, rapidly changing workplace. Employers are aware that they can't use go to recruitment in the way that they used to because the skills aren't out there and there's fierce competition. So they need to train their own workforce and do things differently. But we've also found that they're not skills planning. So our research shows less than half of businesses have a skills plan. And part of that is businesses not having the skills to understand their skills needs, which sort of sounds obvious, really, but that's not their day job. They're running businesses. So we need to help them in identifying and articulating that need, because then that enables them to see where they can invest better, and it enables the market to respond. We need to know where to go to get good quality training and know that it is good quality. They need access to provision where they need it in an agile way that's affordable and local, and its ability to recognise the return on investment. So to understand, if I do this, what difference is it likely to make? Am I going to see a more productive workforce as a result of that? How to incentivise? I think we need a better mix of full-fat qualifications, long qualifications, and the more shorter, nimble, agile, modular accredited units that help people get the skills they need quickly to take on those opportunities. Funding in some cases to meet the additional costs. A lot of what we've been talking today, if you're taking on young people into apprenticeships, there are additional costs for employers and people from some different cohorts across the workforce as well. And crucially, and I'll end on this, a stable, coherent system to give businesses the confidence to invest for the long term. The worst thing is chopping and changing. The skills initiatives come and go, and that really doesn't help employers. It takes them a long time to hear about it, even longer to do something about it, and even longer than that to get a return. So plea for stability.
Yeah. And of course, all the while that we've seen all of the kind of various initiatives being introduced and kind of that policy churn, employer investment has been falling. I'd really like to come back to the point that you made about the kind of expectations of employers as investors too, when we come on to the discussion. Thank you, Jane. Martin, can I hand over to you next? I kind of highlighted, the fact that we have got some really kind of quite stark inequalities when it comes to kind of access to training opportunities and apprenticeships, and we've seen some changes there with the introduction of the apprenticeship levy in terms of who's actually accessing apprenticeship opportunities. Can you tell us a bit more about the kind of Pathway Group and your multicultural apprenticeship alliance, and a bit more about your view on underrepresentation and these inequalities?
So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for that one. Just in terms of my own sort of view, what I've tried to do is to put it more into a personal account, given the experience. But I just want to thank those that I've had sort of conversations with today. It's been very insightful. When you think of myself, employability, skills, training, I'm probably just a small cog of that bigger network that is out there, and it's things like today that really gives you insight to actually there's a whole bigger picture to it all, and I think it sort of ties into why we feel that we're constantly repeating the same topics year on year, coming out to different conferences. It is the fact of we are progressing through in terms of what we're trying to overcome and what we're trying to put in place. One thing I do know, just from the couple of speakers I've listened to today, and obviously the conversations, it's very clear that we've all got the right intent. We're all looking at different perspectives in terms of what we're trying to achieve, but the way that we do that is by working together. It is that key part. We all share the same goal in terms of that better society, greater opportunities for all. We were talking in the previous session of accessing in-work support, and my sort of knowledge and understanding of it was very small, and you just start to think of all these different parts that come into it, the likes of housing, the likes of the benefit system as well, and it creates that bigger picture with it all. But again, it comes back to show that we've all got that same intent, that we're trying to support people into work and then into that career to sort of progress on from. Now, from my point of view and where my expertise is with apprenticeships, I've been in education training for all my working life. I will say I've just turned 40, so that might give you an idea of how long I've been in education training, and I've seen a lot of those changes. From my experiences, from many levels, I've done direct delivery, I've done the management of them, I've done the design, I've even done functional skills for those that have dipped into that side of things as well. So I understand the mechanics when it comes to the apprenticeship and what those individuals are trying to achieve there. I am that bit of a self-proclaimed apprentice ambassador, a lifelong learner, as you like. I understand that apprenticeships aren't necessarily everybody, but there is something out there for everyone. For me, it is about careers, not courses or just apprenticeships or just going on and doing a standalone qualification. It has got to come to that careers, which chimes very nicely into that careers advice, people being able to access those and being that key point. For myself, in terms of underrepresentation, I know that there's more dialogue, there's more awareness that's taking place, there's more conversations that are happening. The reason I know that, because day in, day out, I'm having conversations with different people to understand, what they're targeting, what are they striving towards when we start talking about equality, diversity. Now today, I'm standing in for my colleague Jagdeep Soor. Some of you may be associated with him or familiar with his LinkedIn activities. He heads and leads on our Multicultural Apprenticeship and Skills Alliance side of things, where we're proactively out there looking at that policy change, educating, connecting with communities, and also the employers as well, which are all key parts that creates that bigger partnership for us all. Day in, day out, everything that we're doing ourselves, we're trying to create those role models, for those young people and sort of mature learners as well, to actually aspire to be that next generation of the workforce. How do they move through what is such a complicated system out there of being able to access funding and opportunities, and in some cases, just gaining that job to then enable that career and move through. Just in my own time, I know I've impacted the lives of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, or tens of thousands, I should say, of individuals, and that might be from showcasing the apprenticeships, promoting any of our programs, whether it's going out to schools and doing parents' evenings and career showcases, but it's also that careers advice and also wellbeing support. There's so many services that wrap up into it all, really. I don't know, we've mentioned things like the apprenticeship levy. or the apprenticeships as a whole, I know when they come back in 2017, we were all sort of quite shocked in terms of, well, what does this mean for us? How's it going to change for us? But it's that practical implementation was challenging for a lot of organisations. You know, we've had things like the apprenticeship levy, the apprenticeship levy transfer that's come into place, and it's been such a key part for social mobility to enable SMEs to actually recruit from these diverse communities, and you know, which ultimately benefit everyone. But I've just been given a little warning there, so I'll be quiet for a couple of minutes now.
Great, thank you, Martin. Robert, can I come to you next for kind of CBI's perspective on this, and kind of what role government, trade unions and other actors can play in supporting businesses to invest in skills?
Sure, thank you. So for those of you who don't know, CBI is a not-for-profit membership organisation, a very large household name organisations and very small local businesses as well. Trade associations, uniquely further education, higher education and independent training providers. So we have a genuine mix of all the players within the field, and that's why we say we represent the voice of 170,000 businesses in that. And we've heard already today about how there are future changes within the labour market. You would have heard, most of you, the statistic that says 9 out of 10 people will need to upskill by 2030. And so retraining and upskilling are the biggest games in town. We've been working with our members to try and look at what that means in practice, and there's 4 principles that have started to come out of those discussions of what needs to happen. The first is we need to improve our strategic workforce planning. So as Jay was saying there, people aren't planning well enough. It used to be quite simple to recruit someone, stick an advert in a newspaper, and there you are, you buy them in. Now you have to think about building your talent pipeline. But if you build your talent pipeline and you haven't got your order out this week, then that's going to cause you problems. But then again, if you're just focusing on your order this week and not building, you're going to have problems as well. So it's a much more complicated landscape of build, borrow, buy that in terms of HR would tell you. And that's not only businesses that need to do their strategic workforce planning, it's actually about government as well. Again, I think Jane was talking about how things change so quickly and so rapidly. We'll probably go through this well. Same meat, different gravy, my mother used to say. There will be some changes of names and things, but how much will really be changing underneath all of that. The second thing was about strengthening the apprenticeship system and strengthening the non-apprenticeship training system. Very much the position, I'm sure, of the apprenticeship levy. Very pleased to see that is going to be reformed into a growth and skills levy. But the apprenticeship system itself needs to be made stronger. Apprenticeship funding doesn't go up in line with inflation. That immediately puts pressure on providers to be able to deliver. So there are some things that can and should be done as well. We also need to be looking at how we get people into work, so making sure that young people are work ready. Is there enough that's going on there to prepare people for the world of work? And how do you get people back into work? The worrying case of NEETs amongst young people and the case of a number of older people not going back into work, that needs to be cracked. But in terms of increasing employer investment in work, our own members showed us that fewer than 4 in 10 say that they're investing enough, so they're taking that one on. But what are the reasons for that's happening? There are barriers that are stopping them. The more vociferous of our members will turn around and say, as one did, don't put my corporation tax up from 19 to 25%. Then have a go at me about not investing enough in skills. Because the thing about training and investment in skills is it's discretionary. And we've got a cultural problem in this country, I think, to do with our investment in skills. Why don't we invest in skills? Why doesn't the government invest in skills? Because we don't. Training becomes one of those first lines in the budget that goes when money gets tight, and we need to change our mindset and change our attitude. But there is good practice that goes on. An aerospace member of ours worked with their local enterprise partnership. They're doing digital courses for young people, and I'm sure you've all can tell me examples of those kind of things that are happening as well. Another one of my colleagues at the moment is at Hinkley Point at the moment, where an energy company has got a great partnership with an FE college, setting up an academy as well. So those things are out there. The dots are out there, but the challenge is how do you join up those dots? And the key to it is collaboration. If you just lay this at the door of employers in the same way as if you just laid it at the door of the government, it won't happen. We need to have a more collaborative approach. We need to look at where the Venn diagram crosses over with training providers, with employers, and with government as well. So we've all got skin in the game, so we can all agree what the actions are that need to be taken and get behind it. Hopefully something like Skills England will do that. Still unclear what that body will actually do. But certainly there is a need for some kind of independence, some kind of skills commission, someone to take a step back and give us a bit of an overview.
Great. Thank you, Robert. Kirstie, I think you're going to pick up on that point that Robert
Probably. It's all
made
been said, really.
about,
It's a great thing of going last.
about the culture of learning.
Yes. Yeah.
And how we create more of a culture of lifelong learning, and what more we need to do to kind of really foster that.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think I'll probably pick up on a number of points. I think probably I'll give a sort of pan skills view, really, to which I think will sort of draw in a number of the points that have already been very well made. I mean, I do just want to say, though, I think this is the title of this session is probably one of the most fun titles of a panel I've ever been invited to, really. Carrots, sticks, and silver bullets. What a great thing to be able to talk about. Unfortunately, I'm not sure how many carrot sticks or silver bullets we've got at the moment, but we'll find a few, I promise. I'm going to try and find a few. And I think, in all seriousness, the past 14 years have probably seen not too many, probably a lot of stick, very little carrot, and when the silver bullet has come, it's certainly not been silver. And I don't say that flippantly. I say that as someone like everybody in this room who's lived through the last 14 years and the previous, years of the previous government and so on. And I think the point that we see a lot of this come round and round again, and yet what we do need now more than ever is that change. And it is a cultural change, actually. It is a cultural revolution. I actually deliberately use that word rather than evolution this time, because I think we need to inspire more people and employers to understand the benefit of lifelong learning for lifelong employability. But it's how do we do that? Now, the good news is, even if we don't think there are many silver bullets, the fact that we do now have a new mandate through a new government that is clearly wants to see change and has clearly put skills at the heart of what it's saying it wants that and needs that change to be, I think should give us causes to be optimistic at the very least. And I think my first silver bullet would be for the government to shoot immediately, and I think they're already starting to say this and do it, is if every government department had its own skills strategy, implementation strategy, and budget attached to it, and the key 5 things it needs to achieve through skills, that would be an amazing first step forward in terms of having something that we could see, something very tangible coming from. Because we know that the new sort of government and our new cabinet's going to have so many big ticket items. It's got AI, it's got machine learning, automation, robotics, climate, big data, shift from global, power from west to east, and then of course, as I say, the green economy. These are big ticket macro items that are not going to go away, but the fantastic thing about those macro challenges, at the heart of them lie skills. So it's how do we think about how skills are deployed and how we think about that long-term planning that we've never done particularly well in this country, but still recognizing we've got some short-term needs that we've got to address now, which I think, Robert, is where you were coming from. And I think, there's no doubt that we've had a pretty uncoordinated skill system for the last 14 years at the very least. I think Skills England does provide some opportunity for us to think about how do we create that coordination and that real planning between what does need to be really centralised versus what can we push out to the grassroots, to the local and regions, and really start to get that supply and demand properly mapped out, because it's all highly doable. And then how does the funding flow to support that? So possibly I'm feeling optimistic because we're only day 6 in. Day 60, maybe we'll be saying something different, but I think there are reasons for us to think about how we turn the challenges we've had recently into opportunities. I don't think we can talk about the role of employers without talking about the participation rates that have fallen in the last decade, 50% with young people, those not in education, employment, and particularly BAME groups affected by this inequality. And if we think that by 2035, almost 1 in 2 adults will have a degree level qualification, but 1 in 3 will still have low qualifications, and this is by far higher than many of our other OECD countries, I think that talks to some of the problems that we've created in the past and what we need to do as we look forward. The inequality is quite stark. And then if we add then the fact that we know that the shelf life of skills today, if you go back to the 1970s, I don't know how many of us were learning in the 1970s. We don't need to put our hands up and embarrass ourselves just yet. We were just talking earlier on the table about who are the millennials and who are the Gen Zs these days. But, you know, the joke of it is, if you look at the 1970s, you could do a qualification and you could pretty much rely on it lasting you your 30-year career, give or take. Now we're talking about skills that probably are out of date within 3 years, and in some sectors, you know, less than that. So there is this sort of need to balance the long-term planning and the long-term progression routes that create these higher level skills that we do need for engineering, for STEM, for all the sort of areas that we know we need to increase our ability in. But how do we also map that with short, sharp skills interventions that are going to allow people to have lifelong learning, to be lifelong employed, because they're going to change their jobs, or at least their skill sets, a number of times in what are now 50-year careers, as opposed to the shorter careers that our grandparents will have had. And then, of course, we know that we need to do something to fix the SME issue. We can't keep shying away from that. And although the previous government, through the apprenticeship levy, tried to do what it could within the way the current levy is currently structured, there is so much more we could do innovatively to switch that back on. For SMEs. I mean, Jane, you touched on a little bit of that as well. How do we actually make the levy far more flexible so that it encourages that mentoring, that coaching in the workplace? How much can the levy be used, maybe not for wage subsidy, but for other subsidies that encourage more SMEs to actually take on people through apprenticeships? My big worry about the Skills and Growth Levy is that whilst I think it's a great opportunity to create flexibility to bring shorter courses, more flexible training in, that we mustn't dilute apprenticeships. Apprenticeships, despite the fact we know they've fallen, despite the fact that we know they're being far too used for people already in the workforce, as opposed to targeted on younger people, if we found flex in the levy that actually targeted young people in particular local regions against particular local industries, we could have a far more effective levy working, and then we'd also be dealing with the talent pipeline that needs to flow through for the next 5-10 years. So I think one of my sort of I guess carrots, possibly stick, maybe a bit of both, is not to use the growth and skills levy to dilute apprenticeships, but make sure it can still work within a broader skills system. The other thing I'd probably be using my stick and carrots for is definitely halt qualifications reforms. That's something that we need to do very urgently. They've already done potentially damage in the wave one. We need to stop that damage continuing. Too many people in this country rely on those particular qualifications to have good jobs, and we need to get back to valuing those qualifications that support those good jobs. So I think this new government's got a brilliant opportunity to do something quite immediately, shoot that silver bullet and halt the qualifications review. So I think there are some really short, sharp interventions they could take very quickly. Yep. Readiness for September, in readiness for the next sort of budget review that they'll do in October. And then I think, you know, back to the point Robert made, this has all got to be about collaboration now. Collaboration with industry, collaborations with experts like you in the room, who can get together with government and can really try and understand what the pathways for progression need to be to get us to a productive lifelong learning culture that we know we can be.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kirstie. Lots there, and saw lots of nodding heads when you were talking about coordination and planning and, more collaboration. I really want to take some questions from the floor. So if you've got a question for our panel, please raise your hand and our team will get a mic to you. There's a question just over here from Paddy. Paddy, if you want to introduce yourself as you ask your question.
Thank you. Paddy Craven from City and Guilds. And my question, I think, relates to fundamentally at the heart of some of this engagement is something around employer investment in workforce development strategy, etc. Do you think we do enough in our country at the moment to really explain the narrative behind skills and productivity at a sector level? Because I think sometimes when I see the comment made, everybody kind of agrees with it and nods. But I'm not too sure we actually do enough to explain at a sector level, this is what a productivity gain means for you, and this is where skills investment leads to that productivity gain. And I think sometimes, therefore, employers don't always recognise the need to actually deploy effort in investing in that way.
Okay, great, lovely, thank you. I'm going to add a couple of questions to that. So obviously, we've got a question there about, you know, the need to take more of a kind of sector focus and kind of make the case on the kind of sectoral level for kind of investment. I'd also like your perspectives on what should happen next at the local level. Jane, you talked about the local skills improvement panels, and a bit about how, to some extent, they kind of set an expectation that employers will be investing. I think in general, in terms of our approach to public policy, the focus has really been on trying to get employers to steer the publicly funded system rather than focusing on employers as investors. So, you know, there's kind of what can we do at the national level, but really interested to hear your views too on what more can be done at the local level, as well as Paddy's question on sectors. So, who wants to start?
Let me jump in about the thing to do with sectors as well, because I don't disagree. I think, you know, the idea of anything you can make real is useful, and it's the same with any of us, isn't it? If you kind of relate it to your own life and your own experience, that works well. So that works in terms of sectors. I think one of the challenges within that is that people are operating very cross-sectorally, and a lot of the skills that are required are cross-sectoral. You know, when I talk to people and say, what skills do you need? They'll say digital, or they'll say green. Now, that isn't necessarily related to a particular sector. So again, it's about a bit of a, you know, a balance with that. And similarly, with in terms of, you know, the local level, you know, what can be done more about the local level? Well, I guess the first thing I'd say is tie it to some kind of umbrella that's a national level as well. So it doesn't just happen. That's the danger with, be it sector or be it local. If you just do, again, little dots in isolation and don't show how these things connect with other ones, which was your point, really, Paddy, I think that's what we need to make sure we do.
And I think, you know, building on that, again, we don't know this yet, do we, Robert, or anyone on the panel, but that's what we hope Skills England should be able to help with, taking, you know, a sort of a central national perspective for that sort of broader national, what's good and healthy for the workforce as a whole, and then being able to dive into those local and regional levels, tying up with, you know, local improvement plans, and really actually being quite ruthless about where the funding should go. You know, if a region's not performing and not delivering, and there is a need in another region, and that might not be popular, but, you know, we maybe need to get to that sort of really output-related, driven mindset that I think we've touched on, but we've never really quite driven. I do think, though, Patrick, you know, to your point, there's an element, you know, and again, I don't say this to be deliberately controversial, but employers should generally know. So to a certain extent, I would expect most employers should be able to make their own ROI case as to why they need to invest in skills. What they then need, though, and I think, again, it was a point that I think both Jane and Robert have both made already, they need a quality system to fall back into to know that they're going to get the quality supply to meet the demand they've got. But if employers can't meet their own workforce planning demands and they don't understand their own skills that they need for the next 3+ years, then I think they've got some serious questions to ask themselves.
Jane, can I come to you on that point? Because you talked about, you know, how many businesses are actually doing training, planning. You know, do businesses kind of understand kind of what their needs are in terms of kind of skills and training, and is there more that can be done to support more businesses on that? And obviously also interested to hear your views on the local level too.
Sure. I think if you think a lot of businesses don't have any HR or learning and development, so they haven't got anybody in-house who's got those skills. In the larger firms, they might have a learning and development specialist as part of a big HR team. It doesn't work like that in a small company. They're busy getting the goods out of the door, getting the money in to pay the salaries at the end of the week. Those are the priorities that they have. And as I say, they've always gone out to recruitment and now they're finding they can't. So it's a sweet spot for us in a way, because we can say, now you have to do things differently. You have to be part of the solution, employer. And that's really the sort of message that's going out there, saying, well, what is it that you need? Well, I don't know. Well, what jobs are you creating? What's the need in your business? What do the people need to do in order to be able to do that job? Well, okay, did you know there was a course here run by your local college that does just that? No, I wasn't aware. Let's connect you. Or did you know there was a course that does that? Yeah, but it doesn't do everything I need it to do. Well, why don't you talk to them and co-create a solution? Why don't you, do something that actually makes that course more relevant to you and others in your sector? Can I do that? Of course you can. Let me introduce you. Yeah, so it's helping employers to be part of the solution. And investment is partly investing their own time in identifying what would work for them that would benefit others as well. Investing the time of their workforce to get the skills, paying some money out if necessary, if it's not publicly funded, but a lot of businesses say that the budget is tight for that, and actually talking to an FD, getting money out of their FD on skills as opposed to a piece of kit. How do you make the case for investing in skills? Sometimes that can be quite difficult. Sometimes firms say to us, well, I only need 1 or 2 people trained, and my college needs me to have 20 in order to put a course on. Yeah, so how can I join together with other employers locally so that there's a group of us that need that training that would make it worthwhile for that college to create something? Yeah. So it's all of those bits and pieces. So when I say employer investment, it's investment in the broadest sense. It's getting your head around you being part of the solution.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm very conscious of time, and I'm gonna come back to you all in a moment, and I'll ask you what your top priority is for the new government on this agenda, what you'd like to see them do, relatively quickly, to address some of the issues that we've been talking about. What's the one thing? Martin, just quickly come to you, just on the apprenticeship levy. Do you think there's more that we should be doing to support better outcomes for apprentices too? I mean, we're talking about the kind of bigger...
No, certainly with the bigger picture with it all, what we try to do is to try to showcase those journeys, those experiences. Obviously, apprenticeships are still looked at being sort of that lesser opportunity when you compare it to the likes of university and higher education. But it is a matter of showcasing what that potential is, what the journeys of these apprentices have actually been through and experienced, in many ways to show that the equivalent journey for them as well. But it is, with the likes of the National Apprenticeship Awards as well, is making sure that we're recognising those apprentices that go above and beyond, and making an impact in their, not only in their organisations but also in their communities as well.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to quickly come down the line and ask you what your top priority is for the new government on this. Jane?
Can I have 2? One, keep LSIPs, but secondly, it goes back to my point about coherence and stability. We've got Skills England coming in. What does that mean? We've got a growth and skills levy. What does that mean? Let's not introduce inertia in the time it takes to make that change. How do we keep the momentum going? How do we keep businesses investing, those who are investing now, rather than waiting for this change to happen? So let's not risk that.
Great. Martin?
I think, just to sort of harmonise on that really, is that clarification is what is going to happen, when it does happen, what that transition looks like for employers, but also apprentices as well, because ultimately it's those young people or those people that are going through those programmes that need to know what's going to happen to them as they go through, and that we're not hindering their opportunities to progress as well.
Great. Robert?
Talk about reforming of the apprenticeship levy, I think that needs to happen quickly. I understand the logic of saying that the extensions will be decided by Skills England, but as has been said, what is Skills England? So get on and set up Skills England. My concern is that if Skills England, again, quite logically, comes out of an industrial strategy, well, you need to get on with the industrial strategy. So get on at pace of change. Let's have an industrial strategy. Let's say a clear remit and membership of Skills England, and let's reform the levy.
all of that plus my own. No, but I mean all of that genuinely, and definitely halt the quals reform. That feels like a tactical one, but it's more than tactical because it will actually do some of that work that's needed right now to make sure there are enough people with the skills we need here and now today, as well as midterm. So we might see it as tactical, but it's something the government could just do immediately, and we would have an automatic positive benefit and uplift. And then I think a more strategic one would be around this planning around Skills England. I would probably say by the time the government does its next budget, let's hope it is early autumn, that by then that they've put a skills strategy into every one of the main government agendas, with the top 3 priorities for each one of those government departments, and then that could feed Skills England's priorities. And I think if we could get that kind of joining up, we would start to have the makings of a system that was focused for the short and then the longer term.
Perfect. Brilliant. Great. Okay, so we're going to be doing more on this particular issue of kind of employer investment in skills at Learning and Work Institute. We're just kicking off a new programme of research with Nuffield Foundation, trying to kind of better understand what influences employers in terms of their kind of training, decisions, skills investment, and what public policy might do to kind of influence that. So you'll be hearing more from us on that. In a moment, I'm going to hand over to Stephen, who's going to introduce the final session. But before I do, can I just ask you all to thank the panellists?
Thank you.
Thank you.